with the cost of living crisis about to collide with Christmas. But now the Bank of England has made it harder still, with interest rates up 0.75% to 3%.
These are big changes. They have a real impact on people's lives. So why are we doing it? And why are we doing it now when so many people are already struggling with higher energy and food prices and other bills? Well, quite simply, we're increasing bank rate because inflation is too high.
This will be grim news for anyone with a variable rate mortgage. The rise means a loan of £200,000 could cost an extra £90 a month. But that's around £330 a month more than December last year when rates started to rise. Even if rates don't move again, that's around an extra £4,000 a year they'll have to find. Drew in Bristol's facing a crippling mortgage hike. He's 49 and is worried he won't get another deal.
I don't know what to do, consider possibly selling, but the purpose of the house was for my retirement.
How are you feeling about the situation?
Distraught. I think that's not an exaggeration. I am really concerned. There needs to be more support for people in my age group, from my position, whether the banks will extend mortgages for people my age past retirement.
Rates last went up in September. There have been 2 prime ministers and 2 chancellors since then. The latest tried to reassure people.
We're taking the difficult decisions. At the top of our mind are families, businesses, people who are worried about jobs, about bills to pay. We want to do what we can to help them, but we recognise the biggest single thing we can do is to help the Bank of England bring down inflation.
Higher mortgages mean higher costs for tenants. Lawrence rents in London and had to fight to get a deal he could afford.
A £400 rent increase from £1,600 to £2,000 was very, very challenging to imagine how we would ever be able to afford something like that. We had to argue them down sort of on bended knee, sort of be begging.
The Bank of England's also warned the UK could be heading for the longest recession since reliable records began in the 1920s. But in the thinnest of silver linings, added it didn't think interest rates would climb as high as previously thought. Toby Sadler, 5 News.
Let's get more now with economist James Meadway, who's the director of the Progressive Economy Forum. James, first of all, for people who aren't on fixed rates, are they going to get an immediate shock on that?
Well, if you're on a tracker mortgage, and a few people are, where it's directly related to the Bank of England's base rate, then the shock could be fairly immediate. For others, it depends on what their mortgage lender decides. Mortgages are set not only by reference to the Bank of England rate, they're set regarding wider market conditions. So things can vary a little bit on that, but it's unlikely that you get away without a significant increase in how much you're having to pay for a mortgage over the next few months or so.
What's your gut feeling on this? Do you think they're going to go even higher, or because some people are saying this is long overdue? What's your take on it?
Well, the bank, today the governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, was offering some, as your reporter said, some sort of words of reassurance, I suppose, that perhaps interest rates wouldn't go up quite as much as anticipated, that perhaps inflation wouldn't be quite as bad next year as they thought. Things like energy prices, gas prices have come down from their peak a few months ago. So in theory, inflation might not be as bad, and then the bank won't have to put up interest rates as much as they want, and everything looks a bit easier. So that's a kind of very, very slender possible silver lining here. But it relies on a lot of things going well over the next few months, like, for instance, big imponderables like who knows what's going to happen with the war in Ukraine, who knows what's going to happen to food prices, very, very unstable at the minute, and lots of big increases there. And also, of course, what happens with the Federal Reserve. A lot of the pressure on the Bank of England to put up its interest rates is coming by the fact that the American central bank, the Federal Reserve, is also jamming up its interest rates right now.
The bank is using the R word now. It is saying it's a recession, which I guess a lot of people have thought it was anyway for a long time. But they are calling it a recession, and a long recession. What's your view on that?
Well, this is exactly it. People will have noticed this. Look, it's unavoidable that when you have inflation in double digits, something we haven't seen for actually most of my life, really, for decades now. When you have food price inflation going up 14%, when you've seen what's happened to energy prices that everyone's had to pay, prices of essentials in particular going up over the last sort of 12, 18 months or so, it will feel like a recession to a lot of people already. The money that they have just isn't going as far. And when that turns into a recession that the big GDP figures notice, that the Bank of England notices, is when that spending that they're not making, the fact that people are pulling back on what they spend on non-essential items, that's what drives the recession. That's what starts to add up to a bad picture next year.
Just a quick one on savings. Will people with savings see a benefit soon?
Well, in theory, they should see some, because the rates of interest across the board are rising, and there's been a big increase in the number of people looking for savings. There's a few people with money knocking about looking for savings over the last month or so. But of course, the rate of increase in your savings isn't anything like the rate of increase as a rule. And what the Bank of England does, you can try shopping around and seeing what you can get out of this. It's not likely to be quite as dramatic as what the Bank of England has just done to its own interest rate.
James, thanks very much indeed. James Meadway.